So what we got here is Unit 6, Lecture 5, solving problems, making decisions, continuing on from the heuristics and that we taught in algorithms and representative availability. Heuristics we talked about last time, the fact that our ego can get in the way, which we're going to see here in a little bit as well, and just sort of things that get in the way of our thinking. Logical thinking is easy to study. Why someone goes boo and you jump away. That's logical. It's rational. It's easy. But what we need to look at is the illogical thinking, because the illogical thinking is what's fascinating, because it's harder to explain and understand. And again, we have to have humility and come to the assumption that many people would think that maybe we think illogically as well. Someone who goes, I prefer blondes. What logic that has this color of someone's hair has nothing to do with their character, who they are, and whatever. And you could dye the color. Why? That doesn't make any sense. But for some people, it's just a feel. It's intuition they've built up over the years. So we're going to take a look at, again, logical as well as illogical thinking. Some things that get in the way of us making judgments. One is overconfidence. We tend to overestimate the accuracy of our own intelligence, but we don't know that much. Our confidence thinks that we do, which is why we're big risk takers. It's why someone goes, oh, I'll just have unprotected sex. What are the odds I get pregnant? Again, I don't want to be a mathematician here, but if you have sex, the odds of becoming pregnant are much higher than if you don't. That's just math. All right. Somebody decides to drink and they're going to drive home. Well, what are the odds they get pulled over? Well, if you get in the car and drive while intoxicated, they're much higher than if you slept it off or whatever. And this illogical thinking of, well, I haven't gotten busted yet. I haven't gotten hurt yet. It hasn't killed me yet. So this belief that we have this sort of invulnerability, this unrealistic optimism, we think that we're better than average and all these other things. And sometimes we have what down here is called the illusion of knowledge. Since many things can so easily be looked up, this damn phone right here gives us an illusion of knowledge. We think we know our friends' numbers, their phone numbers. We don't. We know how to push a button to get their phone to ring. But it doesn't mean that I know their numbers. And the fact that, what is the capital of Wyoming? Is it Casper? I know that's a big city in Wyoming. Or is it something else? Man, I don't even know if I can name another city in Wyoming. There's Casper. It's Decatur? I don't know. Casper. Let's go with Casper. I don't know. Well, let's look it up here. What is the capital of Wyoming? Here we go. Wyoming capital. Cheyenne. Cheyenne is the capital of Wyoming. Oh, I knew that. No, I didn't. I thought it was Casper. That's where my wife lived when she was younger. It's Cheyenne is the capital of Wyoming. Like, oh, I knew that. No, you didn't. You would have said it. You would have written it down so you could have proved it later. We think we know more than we do because I could look it up on my phone. So I go, oh yeah, I knew that. No, you didn't know that. You couldn't come up with it on your own. But again, the phone is not in your head. So again, I don't need to study for the test. I know, no, we don't. And then what we do is we put ourselves in a position to prove our ignorance. Here's a perfect example of it over here. If you had to come up with a range between this number and that number of how long is the Mississippi River, what range would you come up with? It's somewhere between this many miles and this many miles. And most of us would go, well, it starts down here outside of New Orleans, goes all the way up to Minnesota. It's the entire length of the country. Country's about, I don't know, about what, 3,000, 3,500 miles across. It's bigger across and it is high. And it's probably around 2,500 miles, something like that. So let's say between 2,000 and 3,000 miles, somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 miles would be my guess. What is the range of the distance of the Mississippi River? And there you go. Look at that. 2,320 miles. Was your range correct? Of course. Yeah, I was correct. And that's just because I just got done driving. This was my drive this summer. I went from Houston up through Arkansas, all the way up to Ohio, then over to DC, then back over. Actually drove 4,000 miles. And that gives me a feel for it. But it's still a dumb answer. even though I have that knowledge, it was a dumb answer to come up with. What my answer should have been, if someone goes, what is the range between this many miles and this many miles? How long is the Mississippi River? I should have said somewhere between 1 mile and 10 million miles. And the answer would be just as right as between 2 and 3,000. But we want to say between 2 or 3,000 because we want to brag on the show us. But anyone could say from 1 to 1,000,000. Yeah, well, they're both right. They're both correct. The Dunning-Kruger effect. I love this. And if I started this class at the beginning of the year the way I planned on, you've already heard about the Dunning-Kruger. But the Dunning-Kruger effect is just basically, in essence, it's this. Most of us are too stupid to realize how stupid we are. Okay, the Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias in which people with low ability have this illusional superiority, making them think that they're smarter than what they are, the know-it-all on the internet, the person who knows everything about COVID and vaccines or masking up or not masking up because they read a couple of articles. It's amazing how many medical experts are on the internet right now, most of them in neighborhood pages. You know, it's wow, you know, this is amazing. You're a chemical engineer for Exxon, but you have also a degree in medicine as well. That's amazing. Let me take more advice from you. Because we read a couple of articles and we get this simplistic idea that we know it. And this is kind of how the graph works right here. I know nothing. I read a couple of articles. I think I know everything. And then the more that I learn, I start to go, oh, wow, this is really hard. And then once I come to the conclusion that it's hard, then I can learn more. You know, Einstein, the more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know. You take introduction to psychology, you think you know everything about psychology. You go to college, you get a master's degree, you go, wow, there's a whole lot I did not know about psychology. You know, I'm in the middle of this book by Robert Sapolsky called Brave. It's 700 pages. And in the first 350 pages of it, I learned more in that 350 pages than I learned in my entire master's degree. And I'm learning, and that's why I update these things and everything else. But most of us, you know, it's the guy who played football in high school who's suddenly, you know, questioning the coach of the University of whatever. Here's the play you should have called because, you know, I played football in high school. Who the hell didn't play football in high school? Come on, you know, well, I played on Madden, and no, that does not make you an expert. You know, you don't know all the intricacies and everything else the way that you should have. Well, what the doctor should have done, you know, I watched Grey's Anatomy and I can diagnose. No, you can't. No, you can't. A little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing because we think it's all simplistic. You know, it's like when you tell somebody a little snippet of your life, a little story of your life, and they go, well, here's what you should do. And they're suddenly an expert on you. They know so little about you, yet they're giving you advice. This comes from the inability of low ability people to recognize their lack of ability because they're too low ability to realize that they have a low ability. You know, without self-awareness of your faults, you cannot objectively evaluate your competence or your incompetence, you know, because for all you know, that's everything. You know, these people feel more knowledgeable when given decision-making power, job management, parenting, right to vote, whatever. And it just drives me crazy. You know, when I see right now on the internet, and by the way, this is about both sides. As we're going into the school year, this right now is August of 2020, and I'm hearing parents talk about masking or not masking or vaccinating or non-vaccination. And then the constant thing that I hear from parents, both sides, whether it's pro-vaccination masking or it's anti-vaccination not masking, they both say parents should be able to make an informed decision about their child, which I agree with. But the problem is a lot of them are making ill-informed decisions, but they think I read 2 things on the internet. I saw something on a tweet. I'm an expert, but most of us aren't. I'm not an expert on COVID. I'll listen to scientists. I'll listen to experts, and not just people that are going to say things that are going to make me feel good. You got to have enough humility to realize that you don't know. And the Dunning-Kruger effect shows that unskilled people are more likely to overestimate their skill level
while at the same time underestimate the skill levels of those around them, unable to recognize expertise because they think they know just as much as the guy on TV, you know? And when we take a look at this, this is the bottom quarter of people, the second quarter of people, the third quarter of people, the top quarter of people. So your actual ability, this is the bottom. The green line here is the actual ability of people. These people fall in the lowest quarter, the second lowest quarter, the second highest quarter, and the highest quarter. These lowest level people that perform here think that they're up here. And again, logical reasoning, your grammar, your sense of humor, whatever. Everybody else, and here's the other thing. Everybody else estimates themselves as above average. This is average. Theoretically, half the people have to be below that, half the people have to be above it. Below, above, as we see in green. Everybody thinks they're above average. Everybody thinks they're above average. Mathematically, we can't all be above average. We can't. It's just not how it works. Average is the middle. So half's got to be above, half's got to be below. Let me tell you something. Half of your friends are below average friends. They're below average. Not me. I couldn't have below. You have to. Half of them have to be below average. And then half of them are above average. Now they can all be close. But for the math to work, for logical reasoning to work, and as a matter of fact, to a lot of your friends, you're a below average friend. And to some of your friends, you're above average. You can't be above average all the time. And I know that hurts for lots of, but I am above it. I am special. No, you're not. You're not. Unskilled people. So again, the people that fall in this lowest quarter right here all overestimate themselves. Now, again, they don't think that they're absolute experts, but the gap between what they are and what they think they are is huge. It's absolutely huge. Now, on the other side, highly skilled workers, the people who are up here in the 90th percentile, estimate themselves to actually be a little bit less. Now, they still estimate themselves to know more than these people because I'm a doctor or I'm a comedian or I'm an English professor, whatever. I still think that I'm really good at it, but I don't think I'm as good as what I really am because these people have the humility, because they, if you're a professional comedian, yeah, you think you're funny, but you've seen so many other funny people. You can't possibly put yourself as the top one. So what the highly skilled people tend to do is they tend to overestimate the skills of those around them because they hang around other highly skilled people. So since unskilled people don't have the tools to properly judge their own skills appropriately, they assume their ability is higher. Grading is based on their answers, not on an answer key. Not on an answer key. So when we take a look at that, no group claimed to be below average. It just cracks me up. I'm below average in biology, and I'm okay with that. I'm maybe an average athlete compared to some, but when I was in high school, compared to the people on the teams, I was not the starter. I was a guy who came off the bench for 2 innings in baseball. I know that. Of the players, maybe overall I'm above average, but of the guys on the team, I was below average. There were people a lot better than me, and you got to realize that. You got to realize your limitations, and it makes you work harder, and it makes you appreciate those that have it. But a lot of times we don't do that. Maybe I could do that. Oh, I know. Most of us are too dumb to realize how dumb we are. We're blinded by our own ignorance there. The way we frame a question, and again, we're talking, what is this? This is August the 10th that I'm making this. So I think last weekend was the back to school sales tax holiday. Everybody filling up. I live out here in Fairfield. Everybody filling up the mall over there. Because, I got to go to the mall. It's tax-free weekend. You notice no stores have sales on tax-free weekend because they know you're going to show up anyway. So you save that 8.25% sales tax. But they don't give you 50% off the thing. They don't have to. But you think, I'm getting a sale. It's on sale. Anybody, if you've ever worked at the outlet mall or most any store, you'll notice nothing's ever regular price at these stores. It's always on sale because we get a rush. We enjoy it more when it's on sale. We talked about that back when it had motivation. Man, if you buy say a $100 pair of headphones and you get it for $75, you enjoy your headphones a little bit more, because not only do they sound great, but you save 25 bucks. And then you see next week they're on sale for 50. Now I hate my headphones because you feel you pay too much. You know, when we biggie size a drink, when we go from, you know, this is 79 cents, that's 89 cents. Oh, I'll pay the extra 10 cents because I get more. It costs Buc-ee's like a penny or two to give you that much more soda. But since I think I'm getting a deal, I enjoy it more. You know, when you talk about marketing ground beef, do I market ground beef as 25% fat or 75% lean? 25% fat, that's a lot of fat. 75% lean, that's a lot of lean. It's the same beef. It's just how do you frame it? How do you frame it? And again, most stores raise their prices and then they give you a sale, you know, Hobby Lobby. Their prices are the reason everything's always furniture always 50% off, because it's always 60% overmarked. But when you think you're getting that, you think you're getting that, it's better. As a matter of fact, apps are great at this. They're great at this. If you get exercise apps, what a lot of these exercise apps do, where you measure your steps and all that, then what they'll do for you, you know, let's say you get so many steps by your little log. I don't even have them anymore. I had a bike app because I went biking around DC last summer. But anyways, you get so many steps, and then if at the end of the week they'll go, oh, here is you just earned a free Propel 6-pack of water, or 50% off. You earn 50% off of a 6-pack of Propel water. Buy one 6-pack, get the next one for 50% off. You earned it because you put in 10,000 steps, mister. Way to go. We're going to use that coupon. But if somebody just sends me a buy one 6-pack of Propel water, get the second for 50% off coupon, I'm not going to use it because it's just a coupon. But if I earned it because of my steps, I'll use it. So it's now framed as a reward. I'm special, parent. Framing has everything to do with it. Take a look at this. This was back in the 90s. This was a thing that CBS News was asking about gays in the military. And it was a big thing. Don't ask, don't tell, all going for that. How'd you phrase the question? Do you favor or oppose blank serving in the military? Do you favor or oppose homosexuals serving in the military? 34% strongly favored, 19% strongly opposed. Do you favor or oppose gay men and lesbians serving in the military? 51% strongly favored, only 12% strongly opposed. Why is this one higher and this one lower, even though it's the same question? Because gay men and lesbians sounds stronger than homosexuals. Sounds weaker. Just the phrasing of the word, even though the words are exactly the same thing. So again, the types of words you use, how you do it, you know, does a woman have the right to do with her body as she sees fit because it is her body? Well, of course she does. It's her body. Yes, she should do what she feels fit. Does a mother of an unborn child have the right to murder that child, even though science says it could survive? Well, no, you shouldn't murder your child. They're the same questions. It's about abortion. How do you frame it? Has everything to do with how we're going to respond to it. Other things in advertising, you can pause right there and take a look if you want it. And again, this can be used in how you compare your situation to those around you. Really great study that was done over here. They take a map of the Atlantic coast here, and they make up this city in Georgia called Sunbury. Sunbury is not a city that exists, but they talk to other people who lived in other coastal areas, including the Gulf Coast and Houston. And they basically asked them this question. Imagine that you lived in Sunbury, Georgia. Okay, imagine you're someone with experience with hurricanes, Harvey, whatever. Imagine you lived in the town of Sunbury, Georgia, and you saw this map right here. How likely would you evacuate? Because here Sunbury has a 27% chance. To the south of you, it's 3. Up here, it's 17, 17, 16, 15, and 5. Would you evacuate? Well, since your 27% chance was the highest, people were likely to go. They were likely to go because the odds of the hurricane hitting me are greater than it is hitting any one of these other areas. And the majority of the people said, yes, we would evacuate. But then the second group took a look here at map B. let me put map B there. There we go. The second group looked at map B, and map B is kind of the same map. 27% chance here, 3% chance here, 70% chance it hits South Carolina. 70% chance, South Carolina. Would you evacuate? Less than 50% of the people said that they would evacuate at this time. Why? Because there's a 70% chance they'll hit here. It's only 27. It's the same map. This is this. This 70 is just these numbers added together. That's it. It's the same thing. But how is it framed? And again, framing and words we use, biases can come in. Speaking of hurricanes that are named after, they all, hurricanes used to only be named after women. Then back in the, I want to say the late 80s, they started to rotate it between men and women. I don't know if women just thought, hey, it's mean, angry hurricanes, whatever. And then they took it wrong. I don't know. But then they rotated between men and women. But what's interesting about that is there's an implicit bias between the two groups. Or I'm sorry, between the two types of hurricanes. Hurricanes named after men, on average, are deadlier. They kill more people than hurricanes named after women. Because the idea that a hurricane is coming for you, Hurricane Ike is coming. Ike sounds dangerous. Coming up the Atlantic coast, it's Hurricane Sandy. Sandy's not going to hurt me. So I sound like John Travolta in Grease. Sandy's not going to hurt you. So why would I evacuate from Sandy? She's, look at me, I'm Sandra D. Sandy ain't going to hurt me. Ike will hurt me. Ike's a mean guy. Seen the whole Tina Turner story. I got to get away from Ike. Sandy's no problem. Sandy will just come in, be nice, rain a little bit on me. Do people take more precautions with the masculine name? Is there an implicit bias? Studies would show that maybe there is. There's something to that. Again, what would you rather hear from a doctor? 20% of the people who have what you have die, or there's an 80% survival rate? Of course you'd want to hear the survival rate. We talked about that before. Federal Express does not charge extra to pick up your package from your home, and they advertise that at FedEx, you will pick up the item from your house for free. Yet, bring it to our store, we'll give you a drop-off discount. So aren't you technically charging me more for picking it up at my house? No. We're just going to give you a discount if you bring it to us. If a condom is listed as having a 95% chance of stopping AIDS, 90% of college students say that's effective. But when college students were told this condom has a 5% failure rate, only 40% thought it was effective because they focused on the failure rate. Framing has a lot to do with the way that we think. Belief bias. We want an argument that will match our conclusions. Our conclusions are already there. Our beliefs are already there. So we're going to look for an argument that wraps up in my beliefs. And maybe there's some truth there, maybe there's not. So sometimes we will listen to invalid, illogical arguments because we like the conclusion that the argument comes up with. For example, take a look at this right here, a little philosophical. Democrats support free speech. That is true. Dictators are not Democrats. That is true. Therefore, dictators do not support free speech. That is all true. I agree with that. That logic seems sound. Democrats support free speech. That is true. Dictators are not Democrats. I know that to be true. Dictators do not support free speech. No, it's true. So I like all that logic to that argument. That argument is sound to me. The logic is sound to me. But that's a very illogical argument. That argument is the same as Democrats support free speech. True. Republicans are not Democrats. True. Republicans do not support free speech. That's false. That's not true. And again, remove your own biases you may have here. But that's not true. Of course, Republicans support free speech. Donald Trump is very upset right now that he's not on Twitter. He wants his free speech, and Twitter has a problem with whatever. But of course, Republicans support free speech. As a matter of fact, a lot of Republicans right now are talking about cancel culture and whatever, even though it was kind of the opposite of what it was 20, 30 years ago. But of course, Republicans today do support free speech. So that the logic of that argument is faulty. No, it's not. Well, it is, but it's just as faulty as the logic of this argument. They're both faulty arguments. But since I like this conclusion, I agree with this conclusion. I go with the logic. I disagree with this conclusion. I disagree with the logic. Folks, logic is logic. So our beliefs impact how we take on logic. Robins have feathers, chickens are not robins, therefore chickens do not have feathers. Of course they do. Of course they do. But when we get into this absolutism, when we get into this equivalent morality that we go through and all these other things, it gets us into some very illogical arguments at that. And that's sometimes when you're making a point to someone, they just sort of look at you like, like a dog that you showed a card trick to, just like, but to you, it's making complete sense. What you're saying makes complete sense because the conclusion is the conclusion you want. But sometimes your argument is not logic. The curse of knowledge, once we know something, our assumption is everybody knows it. And again, this goes against the theory of the mind that we talked about before. Once you gain an understanding of something that you didn't know before, you presume it's now obvious to everyone. Well, everyone knows. How could you fall for that? When you tell someone a joke and they're like, oh, and you're like, how could you not know that? So again, your assumption, even though you're overconfident about your own knowledge, you can't understand why other people don't see it. Here's Big Bird, but then when you suddenly see the guy behind the little thing, you assume everybody knows that. How could you fall for that? When you go onto YouTube and you see how magic tricks are done, which I like to do. I really like to do that. But sometimes when we know how a magic trick happens and we see other people fooled, we actually lose respect for them. We think less of them. It's the teacher who's been teaching the same subject for 20 years. I'm sure some of you guys have had this person. The teacher who's been teaching the same thing for 20 years, and you ask them a question like, how can you not understand this? Well, because I haven't been teaching it for 20 years and talking about it 6 times a day like you have. So sometimes when it's so simple to you, and that's why sometimes the new teacher is the good teacher. I've only been teaching, I'm not saying I'm a good teacher, but I've only been teaching psychology for about 10 years now, 8, 9, 10 years. I taught history, I taught government, I taught a bunch of other things. So the advantage of me teaching psychology is I realize how hard this can be to understand. Blacks, Hispanics, Asian students can't understand why a white student doesn't realize that racism is real. When a white student says there is no white privilege, of course they can't see it from their perspective. But when you're Black, Hispanic, and Asian, and suddenly someone's following you around in a store for no reason, a white person's not a white person's never experienced it, but a lot of them have it. A lot of them haven't. So again, we get our own perspective, and then when we see things, we assume our world is the way that everybody else has experienced it, and we start to lose respect when they can't see it through our eyes. Which, by the way, is the same as a 5-year-old's egocentricism. So it's not a real high level of thinking, expecting that everybody sees it the way you do. Sometimes you got to explain it. Belief, perseverance. We cling to our initial concepts after the basis on which they were formed has been discredited. We don't care. We want to keep it. We give more credit to evidence that supports our belief, even if that evidence is complete BS. Republicans are going to watch Fox News. Democrats are going to watch MSNBC because that is going to support their biases and their beliefs. And both sides, when Republicans think about MSNBC, CNN, whatever, they go, well, that's fake news. It's propaganda. You're weak-minded for seeing that. And again, Democrats will look at Fox News and say the same thing about Republicans. You're getting an agenda. It's going to become an authoritarian government and all these other things. And both sides go against each other, when really the fun thing to do when there's a news story is switch around and see how they're all covering them. We talked about this polarization that we have. When people are given the results of a study on capital punishment, you're going to take whichever side you believe, and you're going to believe it more. It's rooted in the idea that we don't want to admit that we were ever wrong, because to admit that we're wrong thinks that we're foolish. We're afraid to say the words, I don't know, because we think I don't know means I'm stupid. When I don't know, it just means I don't know. Teach me. If I'm a teacher and I label a child as gifted and they fail a test, well, that must be my fault. Well, I must not because I labeled them gifted. I can be wrong in my label. Maybe you were. If you label the kid disabled, we look for evidence to support that. We never bring them out. You get a kid, he shows up to class, he's got all these modifications. Well, they're limited, and we place that bias on them. And then we can't get them out of it because then we have to admit that they were tested wrong or whatever else. People in a bad relationship if you're in a bad relationship that other people don't like, you look for the good things because you don't want to admit that you wasted your time in a bad relationship. This belief perseverance can actually be very harmful to us. Other forms of belief perseverance include anchoring. The first piece of information we receive about something has higher value than anything else because it is what got its footprints in the snow. So the first judgment we have is the hardest judgment, which is where first impressions can be pretty important. They're not the end all be all, but sometimes it's hard to dig ourselves out of that hole. The sunk cost fallacy. How many times have you been watching a movie? It's a 2.5 hour movie or an hour into it, and you're like, this movie is complete crap. But you know what? I'm already an hour in. I might as well watch the whole thing. You're watching a 12 episode whatever on Netflix, and you're on episode 6, and you're like, oh my God, this is complete crap, but I gotta see how it ends because you're already invested. And if you quit now, that means you have wasted your time. So you think maybe in the end, it'll all come together and it'll be fascinating. And usually at the end, we're disappointed. The backfire effect. When we're challenged about our beliefs, we become more entrenched in them. We just become more locked into them. So the thing is when someone is trying to convince us to something else, usually it backfires and it makes us more entrenched because we don't want to admit our possible faults. And when you think about these biases of a person in a bad situation or a bad relationship, the anchoring. I'm going to remember, when someone's treating you bad, you're anchored in that, well, when we were first together, it was good. The sunk cost fallacy. Well, we've been married for 15 years. I can't quit now. And the backfire effect. Well, you were marrying the wrong person. I'll show you. As a matter of fact, my wife, her first marriage, she told me this story when she first got married. She was 19 and pregnant. Wasn't it an MTV show? I think it was Google. No, but when she first got married, at the reception, because again, she's 19 and pregnant, he's 20. And there were people at the reception taking bets on how soon until they got divorced. and it ended up being a backfire because she's so competitive and I'll show you, and stayed together 20 years. So again, cognitive dissonance. We talked about this before, where again, we get locked in, anchored into our thoughts, and we come up with excuses why we do it. It's okay, I'm vaping, and vaping is better than smoking. And if I do it, I must believe it. And, I don't want to give blood because I don't like the needle, but it's okay because other people are giving blood. We're uncomfortable with what our thoughts are. So we think about reasons why it's okay to be uncomfortable with that. Again, what we just talked about before, group polarizations, when we get into discussions, when you talk about prejudice, and you talk about equality, Black Lives Matter, whatever else, people who already have a prejudice are probably going to get more prejudice. People who are less prejudiced are going to become even less prejudiced. Very rarely, think of how often have you ever been in an argument where at the end of the argument, the other person went, you know what? Never thought of it that way before. You know what? You changed my mind. That almost never happens. Watch any news programs and the talking heads going, and they got to make their point. So we become more polarized. Now, when we're trying to persuade others to our point of view, there's a couple of ways we do it. One way is the central route of persuasion. The central route of persuasion is to use the argument. The argument is based on the merits of the argument itself. Come to this high school because here are the test scores. Here are the teacher qualifications. These are the facts. Vote for this candidate because they have these qualifications. They have this experience, all these other things. That's the central route of persuasion. The problem with the central route of persuasion is most of us don't know enough to be convinced by the central route of persuasion. To tell me that somebody's a good what's a good politician? To say that someone's a good governor, what's a good governor? He voted for a bridge. He voted for a bridge to be rebuilt for 150 million. I don't know. Is that a good price for a bridge? I don't know. You can't even get a football stadium for that. I don't know if that's enough for a bridge. So the central route of persuasion is kind of hard for us because most of us are ignorant on a lot of topics. So usually the way that you persuade the masses is something called the peripheral route of persuasion. The peripheral route of persuasion is where the listener decides what to agree with in the message based on cues outside of the strength of the argument. Here's Jennifer Aniston. She has lovely skin. Oops. And here, oops. There she is with this Aveeno skin cream. Well, if she uses that and looks fantastic, I could look fantastic too. You know, Donald Trump, before he ran for president, here he is with his lovely wife and his young son, Barron, and he's in this very wealthy townhouse. Well, he's a wealthy, successful businessman. Certainly he's going to be a successful president. If you can run a business, you can run the presidency, even though one really has nothing to do with the other. And the fact that she's an actress, she's not a skin cream expert. It's that halo effect that we go with. All right, foot in the door, door in the face that we talked about before. There are other examples of this. They're more likely to be effective if you are distracted or you just don't have the time to dedicate towards it or are persistent with it. This is why Netflix will use their recommendations. Well, you like this, you'll probably like that. You know, just watch what my friends won't shut up about, you know, because if they like it, I must like it. You know, I don't know if enough, okay, I'll take that. So peripheral route of persuasion is usually how we get there. Now, again, illogical thinking. Illogical thinking is what you want to study because that's the fascinating stuff. Logical thinking, when someone says 2 + 3 is 5, that's not really that interesting. But when someone goes, you know, I always learned that 2 + 3 is 38. What? I want to dig deep with that person. Okay, this is an example of illogical thinking. I'm a Bengals fan. It's a very sad life I have. You know, very, very sad life. But being a Bengals fan, this is Jamar Chase, first round pick of the Bengals in 2021 draft. And he was going out to practice, and people are like, all right, you know, going out to practice, there's Jamar Chase, and he puts up this little sign right there. And this lady says, please don't display the devil horn sign. This is on like the Bengals website or whatever. And then that is followed by a bunch of people going, man, that's not the devil horns sign. That's American Sign Language. That's ASL for I love you. You know, I do this to my wife all the time. You know, when I'm saying goodbye to her. This is I love you. You know, that's the devil. This is I love you, or you know, rock and roll, whatever. But this is I love you. So a bunch of people responded again and again and said that. And then she said, you might want to read about it again. So even when people were giving her logical arguments, even linking her to American Sign Language sites and everything else, then she concluded, believe what you want. Not admitting that she's wrong. Just, oh, believe what you want. Now, again, I don't want to get into the fact that her name is Karen, that it's a white woman named Karen. Because again, when we talk about racism, why is it acceptable to, because when you think of a Karen, it's a white person. That's racist too. You know, you lump, and then I mean, I can't even imagine being a teenage girl or a 7-year-old girl whose name is Karen right now. The hell, that must be her life. You've become a meme. But again, back to this idea of some people, they just get stuck into that illogical thinking. So why would we do it? Well, there's a lot of reasons that we have illogical thinking. One reason, we have vulnerable egos. 1975 study where they basically told people that here's a real suicide note, here's a fake suicide note, see if you can identify the right one. Now, again, half of the people identified the right one, half the people identified the wrong one because there was no skill in it. You know, it was there's no skill in being able to detect a true suicide note. But anyways, those that picked note A were praised because they said, well, you got the right one, and they were praised. And then they started to think, I'm really good about it. And the ones who didn't pick the right one, oh, you're wrong. You really can't do this. Well, I really can't do that well. Then later on, they were told, you know what, we're just kidding. Neither know it was real. But in spite of this, when asked later about it, those who were originally told, anchored in, that they picked the right one, still felt they picked the right one. They still felt it, even though they were told later they weren't. So again, we have very, very vulnerable egos. Things seem truer when they're repeated. the more often you hear it. And that's why you'll hear some politicians tell the same lie again and again and again, because the more you repeat it, it becomes the truth. Ask Goebbels and Hitler in Germany. You know, when a group of people were given a series of very obvious fake headlines, only 4% of the people believed them to be true. But when the same group later had it repeated, that number jumped from 4% to 8%. Now, again, you'll go, well, that's really, so there were ridiculous headlines like Hitler is still alive in Argentina, and he was responsible for the Falkland Island War against England in the 80s. And by the way, I did say the Falkland Islands. That's what they're called, even though every time I say the Falkland Islands, it sounds like someplace outside of Brooklyn. So again, once we see something, sometimes it becomes impossible to unsee it. This illusionary truth we talked about before, because then we have to admit being fooled by it. False recollection is correlated with lower IQ. And people who fall for these fake headlines or have a false recollection or source amnesia, whatever, to have lower IQs, lower working memory, poor performance on perceptual tests. And again, people over the age of 65, not as much of a working memory, worse at updating their beliefs, can't teach an old dog new tricks. And these are the people that are more likely to get locked up in conspiracy theories as well, you know, because they keep hearing it and they believe it, and they can't admit that it's a conspiracy. We want the positive, folks. We want good things in our life, but we pay more attention to the negative. Negative grabs our attention because the negative is looked at as dangerous. So I got to pay attention to the negative because it's dangerous. So in the weird way, even though the positive is more appealing, the negative is more attractive. It attracts my attention more because it's threatening. Because if I ignore the negative, I could put myself at risk. So we pay more attention to the negative. So the brain, or Bane from Batman, whoever, the brain processes negative information more thoroughly. We explain negative things with more complex language to make sure that people are, do you realize how much of a threat this is? And this negativity bias was shown during, they did a little Stroop test. Remember the Stroop test we did back with sensation and perception? Okay, what word does the color say? Okay, now what color is the word? When it came to threatening words, sadistic, those were harder to just name the color than it was good words like honest. Okay, negative words took extra time because of the perceived threat of the word. It was hard for me not to say the word and just say the color in those tests. Another reason for illogical thinking is the human mind is built for belief. When you picture or hear something, you assume it's true. There it is. I see it. It must be true. It's on my phone. It must be true. There's words. Someone wrote the words. Must be true. I mean, we want to believe. We want to trust. When I drive down the highway, I want to trust that the guy in this lane over here isn't going to come over and take me out. I want to believe. I want to trust. And this leaves people vulnerable to predatory rumor mongers, as 50% of adults get their news from social media. We get our news from social media, and then we only get our news from people we follow. Man, you got somebody on social media that just annoys you because they have the opposite of opinion. You don't follow them. So all you do is follow people that you already believe, and you just get recycled. It's like you're breathing the same air on an airplane. You never get the fresh air. You never get the other opinion. These companies gain profit from attention, not from accuracy. They get it from you tuning in. Fake news is shared more and spreads faster than the truth. Why? Because fake news, it's false, it's interesting. It's interesting. The untruth is way more interesting. We want to be first. We want to be first. We want to be on page one. We want to be the one who saw it first, the one who shared it first. And we're more likely to share stories that make us more emotional, and we're more likely to share stories that are false. Someone made up a fake NASA account here and put out on January 4th, 9:47 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, the long-awaited planetary alignment will cause a gravitational fluctuation that will leave you weightless for a short period of time. Hashtag be ready. This was retweeted 23,000 times, favorited by 12,000 people in December of 2014. Of course, we're not all going to start floating, but that's interesting. Spread that and get that out. Came up with it first. When you're floating, I told you you would do it first. Now, Here's where it gets really weird. Something called artificial intelligence, almost done here. AI is basically computers. When computers were originally put together, they were there to add. They were there to, you put stuff in it and regurgitates it back to you. It could solve some problems, whatever. But it wasn't going to have any sort of decision making. They were designed to sort of do repetitive behavior, maybe learn the rules of tennis, get some algorithms in there. You make that move. Let me think of 1,000 different moves I can make. There's the best one of those thousands, whatever. And then what they discovered as time went on is that these computers could actually start to learn. There's a great movie called War Games from 1984, and it's kind of based on some scary things that happened in the 80s where we weren't sure whether we were being attacked by the Russians, or the Russians weren't sure we were being attacked by them, whatever. But the basic essence of the idea was, could a computer be logical? Could a computer learn? Because up until that point, computers just did what they were programmed to do. Repetitive behaviors, algorithms, whatever. But could a computer learn from mistakes? Could a computer learn patterns and all these other things? And could it correct errors? And what they basically discovered is they got these computer neural networks that learn from experience. If you ever take the AI, the artificial intelligence, if you ever play a video game and you crank that AI up, the computer gets better. And a lot of people go, well, the computer cheats. No, it doesn't. The computer is smarter. Okay, so when you churn up the AI, it doesn't cheat, but it sees that you've run the same play again and again and again. You go to the same base again and again and again. You attack from the same formation again and again, and it just basically learns from that. You know, Google does that. You do Google searches, whatever, they're learning from where you're going. Facebook uses your likes and your visitations to see what you're going to do. Dating websites find matches based on other profiles that you've looked at. Again, The Social Dilemma. If you ever get a chance to watch on Netflix, The Social Dilemma, it will scare the hell out of you, but it will show you how basically all of the social media, if social media is free, if the app that you're using is free, you're the product. You know, you're giving them data, you're giving them information, and they're using you and they're selling you to other advertisers. And again, computers are amazing at this. So, and because of artificial intelligence, when we talk about the spread of bad information today, 2020 is, or 2021, sorry. Last year was the election. It's all come together. 2021 is the perfect storm for spreading bad information. It really is. When you take a look at all these factors. First off, we've got the technology to create sophisticated and compelling fakes. Both stories and videos. 15% of Twitter is bots. 15%. The top 10% of people who tweet represent 80% of all tweets. And then when you talk about in that top 10% is the 50% of the Twitter are bots, two-thirds of all tweets that are out there are suspected of being robots. They're expected, two-thirds. So again, and I'm not talking about a celebrity who uses a company to run it, even though they can't program it and use robots for that. We're just getting regurgitated what we want to see. We have a delivery mechanism with unprecedented speed and reach. I tweet something that could go out to whatever. You know, you've got people with millions of followers, a Kardashian, a Trump, a whomever, millions of followers. Their thought, it's out there. And once it's out there, it's there, it's anchored in. We have a polarized public that wants to believe the worst in those that don't agree with them. There's a hatred for the other side, a despising of the other side, a dehumanizing of it. How could they think that? Disgusting. And we want to validate that evil thought about the other side. Bad actors that want to take advantage of this, you know, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all these, they want, the more traffic they get, the more money they get. You want to impact elections. You want to incite violence. You want to monetize for personal gain. You want to stir up the pot and watch it go. We've got bad actors. And finally, recent choices for word of the year by leading dictionaries. 2016, post-truth. 2017, fake news. 2018, misinformation. These were the words of the year. We're seeing a lot of untruth out there. That wraps up thinking. There's some more stuff there on ways that we think, some 50 cognitive biases between there and there, if you'd like to take a look at those as well. Last lecture, we'll talk about language.